Thank you for being here, and thank you for first testimony before this committee. Many of us have expressed serious reservations over the establishment of the CFPB. Those are still the initials, as you've reestablished. Our concerns were driven by the fear that Congress was creating one of the most powerful and unaccountable bureaucracies ever. Unfortunately, we were right. For nearly a decade, America's small businesses, community banks, and families have experienced firsthand what an unacceptable agency looks like. Since 2011, the CFPB has run roughshod over due process and advanced a political, partisan agenda rather than serving as a place to help consumers. Want to know whether the CFPB thinks a product is abusive? Well, the Bureau knows it when it sees it, and you'll find out as soon as there's enforcement action. Want to understand how to comply with financial regulations? Yeah, you'll see that too. Just wait and see if the Bureau's enforcement team visits you. It's called regulation by enforcement. It's a dangerous and destructive approach to supervision. That's why we invited Scott Weltman on the second panel today, someone who fought Cordray's CFPB and his abusive practices and won. Several years ago, Mr. Weltman's firm was awarded a state contract by Ohio's then Attorney General Richard Cordray. Mr. Weltman's firm worked with Cordray on disclosure language and ultimately had his contract renewed. The debt collection disclosures were acceptable to Attorney General Cordray, but not to then CFPB Director Richard Cordray, who charged Mr. Weltman's firm had harmed consumers by using the very disclosures he had previously approved. Now, keep in mind, there was no evidence of consumer harm, and the Bureau had never promulgated standards on debt collection. Yet the Bureau still tried to extract $1 million from this firm because, well, they just didn't like the look of it. Is that how we're going to regulate? Is that a government standard? Is that best practices? Despite the heavy-handed approach, Mr. Weltman decided to fight the CFPB in court and won. The good news is that it's a new day in the CFPB, and I welcome that. Under Director Kraninger's leadership, she has pledged to provide more transparency and stop the Bureau's ugly history of regulation by enforcement. And she has prioritized the importance of financial innovation to drive greater financial inclusion, which should be the core of the mission for the Bureau. Director Kraninger, I applaud your commitment to innovation. I welcome your new leadership for this Bureau. The work being done by your Office of Innovation is very important, and I hope you will continue to make it a priority. Still, today, you'll face criticism from my friends on the other side of the aisle over some of the steps you've taken. The reality is that you've had unilateral authority to do whatever you want. And I'm not sure everyone in this room thinks that's a good idea. They have a point. While we've seen more transparency in the last year than we've seen since the inception of the Bureau, the structure of the agency still alarms me. It's run by a single individual who has no real oversight or accountability. We expect that you'll testify next year as well, and we're hopeful you'll respond to letters in the meantime. That's not really the best way for us to have executive oversight. The Bureau still has an unfettered line of credit with the Federal Reserve, and still there isn't a CFPB Inspector General. It's not you, Director Kraninger. This has me worried. It's your successor and your successor's successor and what we do to American regulation going forward. Good government should not be a partisan exercise. So, to you, I offer a welcome. My hope that you will follow the rule of law and the letter of the law at the creation of the Bureau. But in spite of the improvements that we've sought legislatively, the Bureau still is in need of reform. And to my friends on the other side of the aisle, I ask you to work with us to pursue sensible improvements to the CFPB. Let's not allow politics to distract the consumer protection that is so vital and so important and that we all hold so dear. I yield back.